Trump continues to lead Biden in the 2024 election and is expected to perform 6% better than he did last time. With such a lead, how many electoral votes would he be able to win this November? With the election less than 9 months away, in this video, we're going to fill in the 2024 electoral map based on the current polling average from all 50 states. Without further ado, let's head over to the map. To fill in this map, we're going to start off with the West Coast and move our way east, starting off with the 3 Pacific states. In Washington, Joe Biden only leads by 10 points. That is half of his margin from the 2020 election. So Joe Biden is off to a pretty poor start, as Washington, a traditionally solid Democratic state, is only going to fall into the likely category. Oregon, though, is barely going to be a solid state. Joe Biden currently leads by 12%, according to the latest polls. And in California, a state that Biden won by over 30% in the previous election, Joe Biden leads by a solid 19-point margin. Still a pretty big margin, but significantly less than what we saw in 2020. Now, the first competitive state we're going to go over in this video is going to be Nevada. 6 electoral votes is going to be crucial if the election is close, and as of right now, it does seem that Donald Trump is the clear far and away favorite to win in the Silver State. He's winning by 7% according to the average of the latest polling. It's not even close right now. Nevada is on track to flip towards Donald Trump, a state he did not win in either 2016 or 2020. This would be a historic victory for Donald Trump. He would be the first Republican to win Nevada since George W. Bush in 2004. Arizona is going to be another state that Trump is likely to win back. He lost the state in the 2020 election by a 0.2% margin, but he is currently expected to win it back as he leads by 4.5% according to the latest polling, and that will make Arizona just barely a lean Republican state. Remember, the margins are solid, as anything over 12%, over 5 is going to make it likely, and anything from 1 to 5% is a lean state. And so with the first 5 states filled in, we have 74 electoral votes for Joe Biden to 17 for Donald Trump, but Trump is going to win nearly the entire rest of the western United States. In Utah, Donald Trump leads by an 11.5% margin, so it's barely going to be a likely state. Idaho is obviously going to be solid. Trump leads by 29%. He's ahead by 21% in Montana, by 53% in Wyoming, 37% in North Dakota. Trump leads by 25.3% in South Dakota, and in Nebraska, the at-large vote currently has Donald Trump leading by a margin of 16 percentage points. That will give him 2 electoral votes. We do not have polling from the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd districts, but Trump is very likely to win the 1st and 3rd district, and he will have a lead in the 2nd district as well. So we're just going to give him nearly the entirety of Nebraska. He did win it all in 2016. In Kansas, Donald Trump leads by 14.5%, and in Oklahoma, 7 more electoral votes will go to Trump. He's ahead in the state by 28 points. Before we continue, only 13% of you guys are subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe and join my Discord server to chat with me personally. Moving on to Colorado and New Mexico, these 2 states are relatively newer states in the Democratic column. They did both vote for George W. Bush in 2004, but they've been blue ever since in 2008 with Obama, then with Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. Joe Biden actually won Colorado by 14%, the largest margin for a Democrat in a very long time. However, as of right now, Joe Biden's only ahead by 6.5% in the state. That's just how much his popularity has fallen over the last 3 years. In New Mexico, Joe Biden's actually doing better than he is in Colorado, but Republicans definitely have a future in this state as Hispanic voters continue to shift to the right, and New Mexico is the only state in the union with a Hispanic majority. And so New Mexico is going to be likely Democratic as well, with Joe Biden leading in the latest polls by an average of 8%. The race in Texas is also not going to be too competitive. Donald Trump leads by 8.5%. That's very similar to his 2016 margin. Donald Trump was pretty close to losing Texas in 2020, at least according to the polls. There were times in the previous election cycle where Donald Trump was actually behind in polling in the Lone Star State, but in the end, he was able to pull off a weak 5-point win. But going into 2024, his numbers just continue to get better in Texas, and it is very likely he will win the state by a double-digit margin. Alaska is also trending in favor of Trump by 8%. 3 electoral votes will go to the former president. Yes, Democrats won the House seat in Alaska, but they're not likely to win in a presidential race at all. It is still very conservative. The state of Alaska has not voted Democratic in presidential elections going back to the 60s. Hawaii, on the other hand, is nearly the polar opposite. It is a very blue state. And yes, Joe Biden's handling of the wildfires in Maui was pretty poor, and I do not expect him to do better than he did last time. In general, Republicans are gaining ground in the state. We saw that Joe Biden did not improve off of Hillary Clinton's margin in the state of Hawaii, one of the few states where Trump did better in 2020 than in 2016. We do not have polling from the state, but it is still very blue, and Joe Biden will still very likely pull off a solid victory, even if that margin is significantly less than the 30-point victory that he won by in 2020. Moving up to the Midwest, we're going to cover the Rust Belt and then the Northeast, and then we're going to move all the way down to the Deep South. So starting off with Minnesota, 10 electoral votes. This state has the longest Democratic voting streak out of any state in the Union. The last time that it went red was for Nixon all the way back in the early 70s. It did not go to Ronald Reagan in 1984. And Joe Biden was able to perform pretty well in the state last time. He won it by 7 points. Go back to 2016, Donald Trump came within 2% of winning Minnesota, and that's likely what's going to happen again. Joe Biden currently only leads by a very weak 2.6% margin in the state. Iowa, on the other hand, is going to be pretty safe. It's not going to be very competitive at all. The state was one of the most competitive states in 2004, 2008, but going into 2024, Donald Trump is going to wipe the floor in Iowa. He leads in the state by 9%. That's pretty close to a solid margin, a state that Republicans only won in 2016. It was an Obama state before, and it was pretty blue for quite a while before that. In the state of Wisconsin, we have Donald Trump leading by 0.6%. This is one of the most competitive states in the country. It was the state that won Donald Trump the 2016 election. It was a state that got him over 270 electoral votes. And looking at what we're going to see in 2024, the same thing is probably going to happen again. There's a very high chance that Wisconsin wins the election for either Biden or Trump, and as of right now, Trump is leading in Wisconsin. For context, the final polls from 2020 show Joe Biden winning Wisconsin by 8%. In Illinois, we have 19 electoral votes. It is traditionally solid for Democrats, but Joe Biden is only leading by a 10-point margin, which is relatively weak and only half of his margin from the previous election. In Michigan, we have another key state, 15 electoral votes, and just looking at the Rust Belt, I mean, these are going to be the states that will decide the election one way or another in favor of either Biden or Trump. If you just look at how close they were in the last 2 elections, it makes perfect sense that they're going to be the deciding states once again, and that's where both candidates are going to spend most of their time. Yes, Donald Trump is very likely to win Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, but he's not going to win the election with these 3 states. He needs to win at least 1 or 2 of these states from the upper Rust Belt. And in Michigan, Donald Trump is performing very, very well, leading by 5.1% in the polling average. In Indiana, Trump leads by 19 points. This is the home state of former Vice President Mike Pence, who Donald Trump will not be running with next election. In Ohio, 17 electoral votes. We have another state that was very close in the early 2000s, but once Trump flipped it in 2016, it's been very Republican ever since. And as of right now, Donald Trump leads by 9.5%. Both Iowa and Ohio are nearing that double-digit range in favor of the GOP. Pennsylvania is another state that really matters quite a bit. It was the state that got Joe Biden over 270 in 2020, and going to 2024, we could see this state get Biden over 270 once again because Joe Biden is leading by 0.3% according to the latest polling. It is very, very close, and Donald Trump is definitely doing better than he was in the previous election. Donald Trump has always outperformed polling expectations, especially in the Midwest, and I will show you guys a difference between the 2024 polling map and what we saw in 2020. Pennsylvania is one of those states where Donald Trump outperforms expectations by 5-6 percentage points. He outperforms them by even more in states like Wisconsin and Michigan. So Donald Trump even being competitive in the polling in these three states is a very good sign, considering how underpolled his supporters have been traditionally in the Midwestern region. Now, moving up into the Northeast, we have New York, 28 electoral votes. This state is supposed to be one of the bluest in the entire country. It voted for Biden by 22 points last time, but as of right now, as Republicans continue to gain ground in the Empire State, with incumbent Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul almost losing her re-election in 2022, Democrats only lead by 9.3% in the state of New York. Can you believe it? New York is no longer a solid Democratic state. The rest of the Northeast is going to be pretty safe for Biden, though, especially Vermont, the most Democratic state in the country. We don't have polling from the state, but it is going to be pretty safe for Biden. In New Hampshire, the incumbent president leads by 8%, while in the state of Maine, this is becoming a source of great worry for Democrats. The at-large vote, according to the latest poll, shows Joe Biden ahead by just 1 percentage point. It could not be any closer. In the first district, Biden leads by 16%. Compare that to his 23% win in 2020, while in the second district of Maine, Donald Trump leads by 14%, double his margin from the previous election. So Maine is a state that Trump could win for the first time as a Republican since the Reagan era. In Massachusetts, Joe Biden currently leads by 22%. This is just 2/3 of the 33% margin that he won by in 2020, so it is much closer there as well. Connecticut is not even going to be solid for Biden this time around. He only leads by 11% in the polls, while in Rhode Island, Joe Biden leads by 17 points. Moving south down to New Jersey, we don't have polls from the state, but it's going to be likely Democratic, while Delaware is going to be solid. This is Joe Biden's home state, although we do not have polling from it, nor do we have polling from the District of Columbia, which has never voted Republican. Maryland is also going to be solid blue, but we do have a poll from the state that shows Joe Biden leading by 22%. In Virginia, Joe Biden is ahead by 4.4%. This is worse than Hillary Clinton's 5% margin in 2016 and much worse than Biden's margin in 2020 when he won the Commonwealth by a double-digit margin. West Virginia is going to be one of the reddest states in the country. It typically is the second most conservative behind only Wyoming, and as of right now, Donald Trump leads by 36% in the state. He's ahead by 29% in Kentucky and by 15.7% in Missouri. Moving down to the Deep South, Donald Trump leads by 33% in Arkansas, by 15% in Louisiana, and in Tennessee, he's ahead by 33 points. Mississippi's 6 electoral votes will also go to Trump. He leads by 18%, and 25% is his lead over Biden in Alabama, and this gives him 223 electoral votes to Biden's 244 before we move on into categorizing the final 4 states. In the state of North Carolina, 16 electoral votes. This state was supposed to be close in 2020. Joe Biden was supposed to win it, according to the polls, but Trump won it by 1.3%. And going to 2024, it doesn't even seem like North Carolina is going to be talked about very much, as Donald Trump leads by 9.3% in the state. That's a bigger margin than his margins in both Texas and Alaska. In South Carolina, 9 electoral votes. Donald Trump leads by 12%. That will make the state solid red. While in Georgia, just like North Carolina, this state is not even supposed to be relevant if we just look at the polling. Donald Trump leads by a staggering 7.2 percentage points. This is a huge margin considering that the state went for Joe Biden by 0.2% in 2020. It was the closest state in the 2020 election cycle. Trump won it by 5 points in 2016, and now he's expected to expand upon his margin 3 elections ago. And finally, in Florida, 30 electoral votes, Donald Trump leads by 10%. It is not going to be close. And so based on the latest polling, Donald Trump wins 294 electoral votes to Joe Biden at 244. Compare this to the 2020 map. This is the map based on the final polls from the 2020 election. Joe Biden was supposed to win 350 electoral votes. Now he's supposed to win 244. And going into November, as of right now, Donald Trump maintains still a very solid grasp over the American electorate.